The smile never changed. Whether standing before tens of thousands of worshipers inside one of America's largest churches, or speaking to millions through television screens around the world, Joel Osteen has become known for the same calm voice, encouraging message, and unwavering optimism. To his supporters, he represents hope in a world filled with fear. To his critics, he represents everything they believe is wrong with modern prosperity preaching. Few religious leaders have inspired as much admiration and controversy at the same time. Over more than 2 decades, Joel Osteen has built a ministry that reaches audiences across the globe, published best-selling books, and led the largest church in the United States. Yet alongside that success, questions about wealth, transparency, theology, and public controversies have followed him almost every step of the way. Long before Joel Osteen became a household name, another man was laying the foundation for what would eventually become Lakewood Church. His father, John Osteen, was already a respected preacher long before Joel ever considered speaking from a pulpit. In 1959, John founded Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, beginning with only a small congregation meeting inside a converted feed store. What started as a modest church slowly expanded over the following decades. John's passionate preaching and emphasis on faith healing attracted growing crowds, and by the late 20th century, Lakewood had become one of the fastest-growing churches in America. Joel Scott Osteen was born on March 5, 1963, in Houston, Texas. Unlike many children raised in ministry families, Joel did not dream of becoming a preacher. While his father traveled the world evangelizing, Joel developed an interest in television production, cameras, editing, and media. After graduating from high school, he briefly attended Oral Roberts University to study radio and television communications. Instead of completing his degree, however, he returned home to help manage Lakewood Church's growing television ministry. For the next 17 years, Joel stayed almost entirely behind the scenes. Every week, he produced television broadcasts that carried his father's sermons across the United States and into dozens of countries. He became highly skilled at understanding what audiences wanted to watch, how programs should be presented, and how television could dramatically expand a ministry's reach. During those years, he rarely preached, and by his own account, he repeatedly declined invitations from his father to step into the pulpit. That all changed in January 1999. John Osteen had become seriously ill and once again encouraged Joel to preach. This time, after years of hesitation, Joel agreed. His first sermon was delivered before thousands of people at Lakewood Church. Just days later, John Osteen unexpectedly died from a heart attack. Almost overnight, Joel faced a decision that would define the rest of his life. He became senior pastor of Lakewood Church, inheriting not only one of America's largest congregations, but also enormous expectations from members who had spent decades listening to his father's passionate sermons. At first, many wondered whether Joel could succeed. His preaching style was completely different. Instead of dramatic sermons centered on judgment, spiritual warfare, or theological debate, Joel focused on encouragement. His messages emphasized overcoming obstacles, maintaining hope during hardship, and believing that better days were ahead. Every sermon seemed designed to leave listeners feeling optimistic rather than fearful. That approach immediately resonated with many people who were struggling with financial problems, illness, broken relationships, or personal disappointment. The church grew at an astonishing pace. Attendance quickly exceeded the capacity of Lakewood's existing sanctuary. Eventually, the ministry made one of the most ambitious moves in modern American religious history by relocating into Houston's former sports arena, once home to the NBA's Houston Rockets. The massive renovation transformed the arena into a state-of-the-art worship center capable of seating more than 16,000 people. Weekly attendance eventually reached well over 40,000 worshipers, while millions more watched through television broadcasts and online platforms. As Lakewood expanded, Joel Osteen's popularity exploded beyond the church itself. His first major book became an international bestseller and remained on bestseller lists for years. More books followed, each promoting themes of faith, confidence, positive thinking, and perseverance. Readers embraced his conversational writing style, and publishers eagerly invested in future projects. His books sold millions of copies worldwide, introducing his message to people who had never attended one of his services. Television also played a critical role in his success. Unlike many pastors who rely primarily on local congregations, Joel understood the power of media better than almost anyone else in ministry. His sermons appeared on major religious broadcasting networks, local television stations, and eventually streaming platforms. Social media further expanded his audience, allowing inspirational clips to reach millions of viewers every week. Whether someone lived in Texas, Africa, Europe, or Asia, they could easily access his sermons from almost anywhere. With tremendous popularity came tremendous wealth, or at least public perceptions of it. Joel announced that he no longer accepted a salary from Lakewood Church, explaining that his income came primarily from book royalties and speaking engagements rather than church donations. Even so, reports about his expensive Houston home and estimated net worth fueled ongoing debate. Supporters argued that successful authors naturally earn significant incomes, and that Joel had every right to enjoy the rewards of legitimate publishing success. Critics questioned whether a pastor should live such an affluent lifestyle while preaching to ordinary people facing financial hardship. Perhaps even more controversial than his personal wealth was his theological message. Joel consistently rejected labels that placed it within the traditional prosperity gospel movement, yet many theologians argued that his sermons strongly emphasized personal success, blessing, and positive expectation. Some respected Christian scholars accuse him of focusing too little on subjects like repentance, sin, sacrifice, and biblical doctrine. They argued that his messages often resembled motivational speeches more than traditional sermons. Joel responded by explaining that many people already live with enough guilt, fear, and discouragement. He believed his calling was to remind people of God's love, encourage them during difficult seasons, and help them move forward instead of dwelling on failure. His supporters praised this approach, saying countless lives have been transformed through hope rather than condemnation. The disagreement revealed a larger debate within American Christianity over what churches should emphasize from the pulpit. Another major controversy emerged during interviews, in which Joel was asked whether people of other religions could enter heaven. His cautious responses generated widespread criticism from both conservative Christians and secular commentators. Some believed he avoided giving direct theological answers because he wanted his ministry to remain welcoming to broader audiences. Others defended his careful language, arguing that he simply preferred not to judge the eternal destiny of individuals. Eventually, Joel clarified that he believed salvation comes through Jesus Christ, although the earlier interviews continued to be discussed for years afterward. As his influence grew, Joel became one of the most recognizable religious figures in America. His sermons reached millions every week. His books consistently sold in enormous numbers, and Lakewood Church continued expanding its media presence. Yet, with every new achievement came renewed scrutiny. Critics examined financial practices, questioned the church's transparency, challenged his theology, and debated whether his message reflected historic Christian teaching. Supporters, meanwhile, pointed to countless personal testimonies from people who claimed his encouragement helped them overcome depression, addiction, grief, and hopelessness. By the late 2010s, Joel Osteen had become far more than the pastor of a single church. He had become a cultural figure whose influence extended well beyond religious circles. Politicians, celebrities, athletes, and business leaders appeared at Lakewood events. News organizations regularly covered his ministry, especially whenever a controversy surfaced. For better or worse, Joel Osteen had become one of the most discussed pastors in the world. But the greatest public challenge to his reputation was still ahead. A devastating natural disaster would soon place Lakewood Church under an intense national spotlight, triggering criticism that spread across social media, television networks, and newspapers. The debate would become one of the defining moments of Joel Osteen's public career and permanently shape how millions of people viewed his ministry. The year 2017 marked one of the most difficult periods in Joel Osteen's public life. While he had faced criticism before, nothing compared to the wave of attention that arrived when Hurricane Harvey struck Texas. The storm became one of the most destructive natural disasters in American history, dumping historic amounts of rain across the Houston area and leaving neighborhoods underwater. Thousands of residents suddenly found themselves stranded, homeless, or desperately searching for shelter. During moments like these, people naturally looked toward large organizations, including churches, for help. As the floodwaters continued rising, Lakewood Church announced through social media that the church campus was inaccessible because of severe flooding. The post directed people toward official emergency shelters that had already been established by local authorities. Almost immediately, however, videos and photographs began circulating online, showing areas around Lakewood that appeared dry. Critics questioned whether the church had actually been unable to open its doors or whether it had simply chosen not to do so. Within hours, social media transformed the issue into a national controversy. The criticism spread at remarkable speed. Thousands of people accused one of America's wealthiest and most recognizable churches of failing to respond quickly enough during a humanitarian crisis. Television networks picked up the story. Newspapers published opinion pieces, and public figures weighed in from across the political spectrum. Whether every criticism was fair or not almost became secondary. The public conversation had already shifted toward a broader question. What responsibility does a megachurch have during a disaster? Lakewood Church responded by explaining that the building had experienced flooding in parts of the property and that officials were monitoring conditions before opening the facility. Church representatives also said they had been working with city authorities and planned to assist once it became safe and practical to do so. Soon afterward, Lakewood opened its doors as a shelter and distribution center. Volunteers arrived in large numbers. Supplies were collected, and families affected by the flooding received assistance. Church members emphasized that thousands of volunteer hours and significant relief efforts followed in the days and weeks after the storm. For Joel Osteen, however, the damage to his public image proved much harder to repair than any physical damage to the building. Supporters argued that the criticism ignored the extensive relief work Lakewood eventually provided. Critics insisted that the church should have acted sooner regardless of logistical concerns. Years later, Hurricane Harvey remains one of the most frequently discussed chapters whenever Joel Osteen's ministry is examined. Just when that controversy had begun fading from headlines, another strange story emerged, one that sounded almost too unusual to believe. Back in 2014, Lakewood Church reported that approximately $600,000 in cash and checks had disappeared from a church safe. The missing money represented donations collected during weekend services. Police launched an investigation. Crime Stoppers offered a reward, and the theft attracted considerable media attention. Despite the investigation, no arrests were made, and the case gradually became another unsolved mystery. Then, more than 7 years later, something completely unexpected happened. In November 2021, a plumber working inside Lakewood Church was repairing a loose toilet in a public restroom. While removing part of the wall, he reportedly discovered hundreds of envelopes hidden inside the wall cavity. Many of those envelopes contained cash, checks, and donation materials. Houston police later confirmed that some of the recovered checks appeared connected to the 2014 theft investigation. The discovery immediately reignited public fascination. How had donation envelopes ended up inside a bathroom wall? Who had placed them there? Had someone intended to retrieve them later? Or had the money accidentally become trapped inside the wall during an attempted theft? Investigators examined the evidence. But even with the remarkable discovery, the mystery remained largely unsolved. Authorities never announced arrests connected to the original theft, and many of the questions surrounding the incident remain unanswered. The plumber who made the discovery received a reward, while the story itself became another unusual chapter in Lakewood Church's long history. Only months earlier, another financial issue had already placed Lakewood under intense public scrutiny. During the COVID-19 pandemic, churches across the United States faced challenges unlike anything they had previously experienced. In-person services were suspended or severely limited, attendance dropped dramatically, and many organizations struggled to maintain payroll for employees. Like thousands of other nonprofit organizations, Lakewood Church applied for assistance through the Federal Paycheck Protection Program, commonly known as the PPP. The church ultimately received approximately $4.4 million through the program. When news of the loan became public, criticism quickly followed. Many questioned why one of the country's largest churches would seek government financial assistance despite its size, publishing revenue, and national influence. Others argued that churches employing hundreds of workers qualified under the same rules as many other nonprofit organizations, and therefore had every legal right to participate. Lakewood explained that the funds were intended to protect employees' salaries and benefits during an unprecedented economic shutdown. Church leaders emphasized that the money supported staff members rather than enriching pastors or executives. Nevertheless, public criticism continued, and eventually Lakewood announced that it would repay the loan rather than request forgiveness. Although legally eligible for the program, church leadership appeared to recognize that returning the funds would help address concerns about public perception. The debate reflected a broader national conversation about transparency, tax-exempt organizations, and the role of large religious institutions in American society. Even people with little familiarity with Joel Osteen's ministry found themselves discussing whether megachurches should receive government assistance during national emergencies. Then, in early 2024, Lakewood Church experienced something far more serious than public criticism. On February 11, 2024, between Sunday services, an armed woman entered Lakewood Church carrying a rifle. Within moments, gunfire erupted inside the building. Off-duty law enforcement officers working church security immediately confronted the shooter and returned fire, ending the attack. The incident shocked worshipers across the country. The gunwoman died at the scene, but the tragedy extended far beyond the shooter herself. Her young son, who had accompanied her into the church, suffered devastating injuries during the exchange of gunfire. Another individual attending the church was also wounded. Emergency responders, medical personnel, and investigators quickly filled the campus as families struggled to understand what had happened inside a place normally associated with worship and peace. Authorities later revealed that the shooter had a documented history of serious mental illness. Investigators spent weeks examining possible motives, while also reviewing security procedures and emergency response protocols. The tragedy renewed national conversations about mental health, firearm access, and security at houses of worship. Joel Osteen addressed the congregation with visible emotion in the days that followed. Rather than focusing on controversy, he expressed gratitude for the rapid response of law enforcement officers, concern for the victims and their families, and appreciation for the medical teams fighting to save the injured child. For many members of Lakewood Church, the shooting served as a painful reminder that even places dedicated to faith are not immune from violence. Through every controversy, one question continues to follow Joel Osteen wherever his name is mentioned. What will his legacy ultimately be? To millions of supporters, the answer seems straightforward. They see a pastor who has encouraged people through grief, illness, financial hardship, and personal despair. His books have sold millions of copies. His sermons continue reaching audiences around the world each week. Countless individuals credit his optimistic message with helping them overcome some of the darkest moments of their lives. To critics, however, the story looks very different. They argue that his ministry reflects the commercialization of religion, placing too much emphasis on personal success, while avoiding more difficult theological subjects. Others continue raising questions about financial transparency, prosperity teaching, and the responsibilities that come with leading one of the world's most influential churches. Perhaps the most accurate conclusion lies somewhere between these competing perspectives. Joel Osteen has undeniably reshaped modern religious broadcasting, publishing, and media outreach. He transformed a large Houston congregation into a global ministry recognized far beyond church circles. At the same time, his extraordinary visibility has ensured that every decision, controversy, and public statement receives intense examination. Whether history ultimately remembers Joel Osteen primarily as an inspirational communicator, a pioneering media pastor, a controversial religious leader, or some combination of all three remains to be seen. What is certain is that his influence on American religious culture is impossible to ignore. His story continues to unfold, and like many influential public figures, it is likely to remain the subject of debate for years to come. Admirers and critics may never agree on his impact, but both acknowledge one undeniable reality. Few pastors in modern history have generated as much attention, admiration, criticism, and discussion as Joel Osteen.